Oh, good. I'm glad you're here. I have something to tell you. JD Vance is the worst. Now, I know I don't need to tell any of you that. He's fairly well known as the enemy of all couches and one of the most prolific liars running for public office in 2024. But are you aware that JD Vance is also in the process of trying to maybe, possibly tear democracy down brick by agonizing brick? But first, hello, my name is V, and this is my YouTube channel, Under the Desk News, where I'll be diving deep under my desk to find the crumpled paper trails of long-forgotten history, while also trying to gently remind you that even when it seems like things are just awful, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. Make sure to like and subscribe, because today we are going to talk about Citizens United. Back in September of 2024, Freddie Brewster at Jacobin reported on a lawsuit JD Vance, as well as some other noteworthy Republicans, were spearheading. This lawsuit sought to, quote, destroy the last vestiges of campaign finance laws designed to prevent the wealthy and the powerful from spending limitless amounts directly on candidates and demanding favors in return. But how likely is it that Trump's running mate, the self-proclaimed hillbilly who can't pronounce Appalachia correctly, could actually destroy democracy? Very. The truth, as I'm sure many of you guys are aware, is there's this thing called Citizens United, and that gives him the path he needs to poison the well of democracy, and quickly. Yes, this is that whole corporations are people who use their money as a form of speech thing that Mitt Romney used to talk about as far back as 2012. Citizens United v. Federal Elections Commission was a Supreme Court case which can generously be called controversial, but realistically can be called one of the most devastating losses for America as either a country or a concept since ever. In short, the ruling on Citizens United reversed campaign finance restrictions, some of which were a century old, and made it so that corporations and various outside interests could spend as much money as they wanted on elections, completely legally. It has had one of the most outwardly devastating effects not only on elections in the United States, but also on our general freedoms. In an interview with New Republic, none other than Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was quoted as saying it was the worst ruling of the modern Supreme Court. Quote, if there was one decision I would overrule, it would be Citizens United. I think the notion that we have all the democracy that money can buy strays so far from what our democracy is supposed to be. Okay, V, but as the old adage goes, money talks. What exactly is so bad about Citizens United? And how is it that nearly 15 years removed from the controversial ruling, things continue to get substantially worse because of Citizens United? But most importantly, is there anything that we can do? Is there a light at the end of this tunnel? Is there a way to overturn Citizens United? Well, the good news is there is. But there are also ways that we can make the system work from within should we fail to ever overturn Citizens United. Citizens United made it so corporations are considered people. And JD Vance is trying to make corporations like that one White Zombie song more human than humane. And yeah, corporations are people now is a thing that people say when talking about Citizens United, but it's not quite the truth. And that's not really what the Citizens United ruling even did. The more accurate way to put things is this way. Citizens United expanded on the concept of corporate personhood, a term describing the idea that corporations either are or should be granted the same individual rights as people. However, it wasn't the Citizens United ruling that did that. The term corporate personhood, or even similar terminology, does not actually even appear in the Citizens United ruling. As the American Bar Association stated in an essay examining corporate personhood, quote, there is a widely held misconception that Citizens United was the first case to create corporate personhood. Citizens United did not grant corporations personhood. Corporations already had it. That's right. A number of past rulings actually granted liberties to corporations as if they were people way before Citizens United came around. Citizens United merely confirmed that it's not just Chevron, it's Mr. Chevron to you. And why would they do something like this? Well, because when your policies aren't popular with the people, the one thing you can count on is your money talking and propagandizing and talking some more. And back in 2020, the Citizens United ruling, put simply, made it so that outside spending during elections in the United States would be constitutionally protected free speech. And this all came about due to a nonprofit conservative organization known as Citizens United, which could be best described as right-wing open propagandists that had a history of making quote-unquote documentary films about what they claimed was rampant corruption amongst the Democrats. Citizens United, who still exists today, are currently promoting their film titled and I am not making this up, Trump's rescue mission, saving America. They have made ties with some very powerful names in the Republican Party with films like Generation Zero and Occupy Unmasked, which were directed by none other than Breitbart co-founder and Trump bedfellow Steve Bannon. They made these films alongside anti-communism screeds like 9 Days That Changed the World, which was produced by Newt Gingrich. And even when notable names aren't attached, they get their kicks by producing films with lovely titles like Border War, The Battle Over Illegal Immigration, which I'm sure is a completely unbiased and objective look at immigration in America. Citizens United, however, truly got their prom queen moment when back in 2004 they produced a film called Celsius 4111. It was a feature-length documentary criticizing Michael Moore's then new Fahrenheit 9/11, itself a documentary that was critical of the Bush administration and how it handled the events of September 11th. You see, Citizens United had leveled a complaint to the Federal Election Commission about Fahrenheit 9/11, claiming that it was political advertising and should not be allowed to be released or even aired within the then required 30 days before any primary election or 60 days before any general election. But when the FEC dismissed the complaint on the grounds that no advertisements featuring any candidate were released for the film during that time, and also on the grounds that the film was not actually political advertising, Citizens United clapped back. Thus came Celsius 4111, which not only ripped into Moore's film, but also into the 2004 Democratic presidential nominee, John Kerry. In a karmic twist of fate, the FEC, which had no problem with Michael Moore's film, felt that Celsius 4111 did violate the Federal Election Campaign Act because Citizens United was not a bona fide commercial filmmaker and did not allow the film to be screened prior to the election. Clapback denied. In a more lighthearted universe, it would have been funny to pretend that Citizens United just dropped to their knees and shouted, "Damn you, FEC, I'll get you and your pretty little dog too, if it's the last thing I do." Except that is kind of what they did. Citizens United, in what can unfortunately be called the pettiest revenge plot imaginable, proceeded to finance countless alleged documentaries over the next 4 years in order to become a bona fide commercial filmmaker. And all of that led to the film that started this whole thing, Hillary, the movie. In January of 2008, Citizens United released a film about then Senator Hillary Clinton, who was a candidate in the Democratic Party's 2008 presidential primary elections with the creative title Hillary, the Movie. Now, I haven't actually seen Hillary, the Movie, and I'm sure I am missing out. But as important as this piece of groundbreaking cinema is to U.S. legal precedent, I can't help but be apathetic to its very existence. And so I did not watch the movie for this. I just went to Wikipedia and read the summary. I'm sorry, y'all. I couldn't do it. And when your film is summarized as, quote, the documentary interviewed various conservative figures such as Dick Morris and Ann Coulter and reviewed various scandals in which Hillary Clinton purportedly participated in, such as White House travel controversy, White House FBI files controversy, Whitewater controversy, and cattle futures controversy. I mean, it's basically just a list of every controversy that Hillary Clinton has either been involved in or was accused of being in, regardless of whether it involved her or not. There's no deeper meaning. It's just lists of controversies. And it sounds like a YouTube drama video, but with slightly less silly names to read out. What Hillary the Movie is about, anyway, isn't even important to this lawsuit. What is important is the means by which Hillary was promoted. You see, Citizens United had this idea to pay cable companies to make their film completely free of charge via their video-on-demand services, because before streaming was God, TV was God 1.0. The idea was to make Hillary available right before the 2008 primary elections, but due to the 30-day ban on direct paid political advertising like we talked about earlier, they knew that this would be an issue with the FEC. But instead of waiting for the FEC to make a move against them, Citizens United decided to make a move against the FEC and sued them in December of 2007 on the grounds that banning this type of advertising or corporate-funded express advocacy was unconstitutional. Now, if this sounds absolutely banana pants to you, the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia agreed because they, too, likely read the Wikipedia article about Hillary the Movie and said, LOL, get out of here with this. It was there, however, that Citizens United appealed the decision and managed to get the case brought before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments for the first time in March of 2009, and pretty early on, the court actually sided with the FEC, stating that there is absolutely no way that this film, Hillary the Movie, could be seen as anything other than a hit piece on Hillary Clinton. And yet, in a 5-4 vote on January 21st, 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Citizens United, ruling that any laws that restricted the political speech of corporations were indeed unconstitutional. And it does get a little bit worse. I know. How could it possibly get worse, right? Well, let me explain this simply. Justices Sonia Sotomayor, Stephen Breyer, Samuel Alito, Alina Kagan, Clarence Thomas, Antonin Scalia, Chief Justice John Roberts, Anthony Kennedy, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That was the makeup of the court at that time. 4 liberal justices, 5 conservative justices. But to expand this a little bit more, especially since in all fairness, Citizens United is a controversial ruling even to many conservatives today, we start with Justice Kennedy speaking for the court as he states that limiting independent political spending from a corporation, or really any group, is a violation of the American right to free speech. On the very day the ruling was handed down, Lyle Dennison of SCOTUS Blog, an independent Supreme Court news website, clocked how ludicrous this was by sharing a fitting antidote. Suppose that General Motors Corp., troubled that a candidate for Congress from Michigan was too favorable to the United Auto Workers, decided to do everything in its power to defeat that candidate. So, aside from spending huge sums of its own money to influence the outcome, it went down to the office of the voting registrar in downtown Detroit, and it sought to sign up, affirming that it was a citizen and a resident of Michigan. Denied registration, it sued, claiming that under the 14th Amendment, the United States Constitution, this corporation is a person and a citizen and is entitled to equal protection under the election laws. What would the Supreme Court do then? I do think it's a little bit funny to imagine like a car going down there and trying to register. Like, what kind of voice would that car have? Anyway, although Lyle Dennison was operating under the misconceived notion that Citizens United were uniquely creating the concept of corporate personhood, he wasn't really too far off from the reality awaiting us. The most generous read one can have on this ruling, per an analysis from the Brennan Center for Justice, is that conservative justices naively believed that spending on campaigns inherently cannot be corrupt, and therefore that the spending would be transparent. This has been proven wrong so many times, though. So how is it that Citizens United changed elections in the United States? In the most meaningful ways, Citizens United is responsible for the creation of super PACs and the empowering of dark money. With a sobering Brennan Center report by Daniel Weiner pointing out that a very small group of Americans now wield, quote, more power than at any time since Watergate, while many of the rest of us are disengaging from politics. So what is a super PAC? A PAC is a political action campaign, and there are a number of organizations that raise money for political campaigns and then spend that money to either support or oppose anything on the ballot. Could be the candidate, could be potential legislation, could be ballot initiatives. Normal PACs are allowed to donate directly to any candidate's campaign, but are subject by law to contribution limits, both from donors and candidates. As a result of Citizens United v. FEC, however, that completely changed. Specifically, in a suit now known as speednow.org v. FEC, a federal appeals court, citing Citizens United, ruled that outside groups could indeed accept unlimited contributions now, and not only from individuals, but you guessed it, from corporations, just so long as the money isn't sent directly to a candidate. What? To put it even more simply, PACs are only allowed to contribute $5,000 annually to any candidate per election, but super PACs?
The limit does not exist. The limit does not exist!
Now, even though super PACs don't have spending limits, they are required to disclose their donors. Unfortunately, their donors can include dark money groups. Dark money, unfortunately, isn't the currency of your D&D campaign's shadow demon. It is money that is related to elections where the source is completely a secret. This has always existed in some form or another, but the ruling in Citizens United has made it so dark money is a fact of life, usually for nonprofits who aren't required to disclose private donors. In your college classes, you might learn something that's called the slippery slope fallacy. It's the idea that if one bad thing happens, another bad thing will happen, which will therefore eventually make everything worse. It's considered a logical fallacy because a slippery slope is often the illusion of logic. An example of that is like if I say, If you don't like and subscribe to my channel, my company is going to implode and I will end up without a home. I mean, those things could happen, but it wouldn't be your fault. That is slippery slope fallacy. Just because one thing is bad, other things will get worse, even if they're not related. Now, I say all of this to you to introduce you to the idea that Citizens United was indeed a real example of a slippery slope, or at least the continuation of one. Back in 2007, the Supreme Court accidentally made a loophole, a loopsie, if you will, in FEC v. Wisconsin Right to Life, which created a disclosures loophole. That says money can be donated to elections under certain circumstances without having to disclose where it came from. Citizens United took that ball, ran with it, and kicked it to the moon. Here are some stats. The Brennan Center for Justice claims dark money expenditures increased from less than $5 million in 2006 to more than $300 million in the 2012 election cycle and more than $174 million in the 2014 midterms. In the top 10 most competitive 2014 Senate races, more than 71% of outside spending on the winning candidates was dark money. So, millions. Bad, right? But by October 8th, 2024, OpenSecrets was reporting that outside groups, largely super PACs, had spent roughly $2.6 billion on federal elections, outpacing spending in any previous cycle. If the current trends hold, OpenSecrets projects that the total outside spending for the entire election cycle will exceed $5 billion. That is $5 billion with a B. And over the years, Citizens United reach has grown more and more with every passing ruling. In 2011, Kerry v. FEC established that PACs could take unlimited money into a single bank account that can run segregated accounts for its candidates. This leads to the FEC allowing hybrid PACs, or Schrodinger's PAC, as I like to call it, which runs as both a PAC and a super PAC. In 2014, McCutcheon v. FEC, single wealthy donors who used to be capped on how much money they could donate to candidates were no longer restricted. Once again, the Supreme Court citing free speech. And in 2021, the Americans for Prosperity Foundation v. Bonta case, Vox reported that before this case, the court treated most disclosure laws as valid, and it typically only allowed plaintiffs who objected to such a law to seek an exemption from it, not to seek a court order striking down the law altogether. But after Americans for Prosperity, there's now a presumption that any such law would be unconstitutional. With more money in these elections, there are more candidates being granted huge war chests to win elections in particularly vulnerable districts, especially at the congressional level. In 2017, a report from the Washington Post found that because of Citizens United, Republicans have earned a massive amount of state legislative seats. Quote, "We find that Citizens United increased the GOP's average seat share in the state legislature by 5 percentage points. That is a large effect, large enough that if it were to be applied to the past 12 Congresses, partisan control of the House would have switched 8 times. Which leads us back to JD Vance. When Vance filed his lawsuit back in 2022, his lawyers asked the court to immediately permit them to seek review of the Supreme Court should they be ruled against, a move that at least one of the judges, Jane Stranch, believed was a cynical ploy to pull a Citizens United, or as Jacobin puts it, allow the Supreme Court to overturn its previous ruling on national party committees coordinating with candidates. Basically, JD Vance wants to take as much money as possible, he doesn't want to disclose his donors, and he wants to be able to speak directly to the people who are doing the fundraising. The judge goes on to say, if JD Vance's lawsuit is successful and PACs are allowed to spend freely on candidates, corporate interests and wealthy donors could use the committees to circumvent remaining limits on contributions. The total amount that individuals can give directly to candidates or their affiliated communities, billions and billions and billions. You could literally buy elections, as we see many people are trying to do. So what do we do? I'm not going to lie to you. Fixing anything related to Citizens United v. FEC is a bit of an uphill battle. It's Mitch McConnell's favorite thing to ever exist, and we know that man is slow and steady. He's a nightmare turtle and difficult to beat, but not all hope is lost. If you couldn't tell, the very rhetoric surrounding this case is very politicized, with people on both sides of the aisle benefiting from super PACs and dark money. Both Barack Obama and Donald Trump famously took stances against super PACs, and then famously, maybe inevitably, benefited from them. In fact, Donald Trump has benefited from the Citizens United ruling in recent years more than any other modern candidate. And most recently, he benefited from the aid of Mr. Transphobic Blood Diamonds himself, Elon Musk, who the Telegraph reported on October 18th had donated $75 million to the Trump campaign. Something Elon could not have done prior to the Citizens United ruling, and the subsequent rulings further decaying democracy. Speaking of a decaying democracy, Action PAC, Musk's personal Trump PAC, has been offering voters $47 apiece to sign a petition that, as the Telegraph puts it, is supporting freedom of speech and gun rights. To make that deal even better, he started, and I kid you not, a daily $1 million sweepstakes for people who sign the petition in battleground states. $1 million, and all you gotta do is give the former Mr. Grimes your personal voter information, which, by the way, he probably already had because he owns the artist formerly known as Twitter. Now, all of this is on top of Action PAC essentially taking over Trump's ground game in key battleground states by hiring canvassers to knock on doors to get out the vote for Trump. Which, side note, is really funny for a lot of reasons, the first of which being that The Guardian is reporting as many as 25% of the canvassing effort may have been forged. Citizens United indeed, except for the ones who are throwing away all the flyers that they're supposed to be giving out door to door. But I think Mike at The Humanist Report outlines well how this is all just truly completely insane.
But here's the thing. They don't necessarily have to be a Republican to win the money, so as MSNBC legal correspondent Katie Fang points out, so if a whole bunch of Democrats sign Elon's petition, then he could end up paying them $1 million and even those winners end up voting for Kamala Harris? And the answer to that question is yes, it's plausible. And if that's the case, Musk could be unknowingly giving millions of dollars to people who despise Donald Trump. And this isn't necessarily even going to do anything to help get the vote out for Donald Trump, because you can't pay people to vote, but you can pay them to sign a petition. And he's banking on this translating into actual enthusiasm and votes for Donald Trump when there's no evidence that that's going to be the case. They're probably just going to take the money and run.
It is the very politicking of the issue that makes navigating this all difficult, especially given that the precedent has been set that this is an issue not of corruption, but of free speech. It is likely going to require a constitutional amendment to get Citizens United overturned, which is not an easy task, especially considering that we would need approval from at least 38 states to enact an amendment. And when is the last time that 38 U.S. states agreed on anything? Was it when America voted to give Rupert Bonham $1 million on Season 8 of Survivor, in the only time that the audience had anything to do with somebody winning on Survivor? And that was a rigged vote, okay? Rupert nearly killed Jerry on that season. We do not stand. So if not an amendment, what else can be done? The likeliest way to prevent further erosion of U.S. election laws would be to change the way the Supreme Court is composed. Without going too deep down the rabbit hole in regards to potential unlikely solutions like setting term limits for Supreme Court justices, the easiest way to overturn a ruling like Citizens United would be for conservative justices like the ones who voted for it in the first place to just be replaced upon their retirement with justices who are more likely to, ironically, be more conservative on campaign finance laws. I know. It's so easy, so why haven't we done it yet? And I know it can all seem rather hopeless, right? This idea that change can only be enacted if we allow it to happen. So what are we going to do then? There needs to be a deep overhaul of the FEC, who continuously undermine its own purpose with each passing year. For instance, in 2024, because of Senator Lindsey Graham, the FEC stated that a candidate's principal campaign committee may participate in a joint fundraiser with a super PAC, so long as the committee and other entities affiliated with or acting on behalf of the candidate neither solicit, receive, direct, transfer, or spend federally. A candidate's principal campaign committee may participate in a joint fundraiser with a super PAC, so long as the committee and other entities affiliated with or acting on behalf of the candidate neither solicit, receive, direct, transfer, or spend federally impermissible funds, nor engage in coordinated communications with the super PAC. What? So you can coordinate to have a party with a super PAC that's raising money as long as you don't talk to the super PAC while you're at the party? None of this is really making sense. I mean, since we began researching this very video you're watching right now, the FEC has further allowed the erosion of campaign finance laws by allowing candidates to directly collaborate with the super PAC. So they were like, whatever, you're all at the party together, might as well not have any rules. The limit truly does not exist, Katie. The FEC is an outdated analog robot in a digital world, a broken gear in a world without repairmen. If the FEC isn't fixed now, campaign finance laws will likely never be fixed either. That being said, the easiest, if not most directly actionable way to change anything is to vote. Vote for a candidate who can advocate for cleaner campaign finance and retooling of the entire system. Vote for local and state laws that will limit the erosion of our campaign finance laws. Vote, vote, vote. As the Brennan Center for Justice points out, publicly funded rather than privately funded elections could help combat super PAC's influence. In a system where small dollar donations are matched with public funds, we could expand the role of small donors and help candidates rely less on big checks and special interests. They point out that by 2018, 24 municipalities in 14 states had already enacted some form of public financing, which resulted in 124 winning congressional candidates voicing support for public financing during the 2018 midterm election cycle. The truth is, just because Citizens United made things worse doesn't mean that they have to stay worse. Elections have long-lasting results that extend far beyond the candidates on the ballot, and Citizens United v. FEC is a perfect example of why it's important to vote for candidates that truly have our best interests at heart. If someone is promising to eviscerate campaign spending limits or corporate spending in elections, I'm not sure that that's the person we want to be voting for right now. Back in 2018, a Center for Public Integrity poll found that 3/4 of survey respondents, including 66% of Republicans and 85% of Democrats, back a constitutional amendment that would outlaw Citizens United. That means an overwhelming amount of Americans, or at least those polled by the CPI, support a reversal of Citizens United v. FEC. And with the existence of organizations like End Citizens United and the tireless efforts of candidates and advocates across the country fighting to reform these laws, something will give eventually. I mean, Ro Khanna's out there doing the work right now. It's truly not a matter of if things will change, it's a matter of when. Thank you for tuning in. That's where we stand with Citizens United. We can fight big money in our elections. We just have to invest in the little guy. So what do you want to learn about next?